hit record, and I'm admitting all folks in the waiting room. Okay.
Beautiful. Okay. Oh, Danny's in the waiting room.
Can I please go first? I have to be at testify at Open Space Board of Trustees at 6:10. Can I please go first, please? Lindsay?
Yeah, Lynn, that's fine. Let me just call the meeting to order. Oh, hang on here. Sorry. We're just gonna call this meeting to order right away so that Lynn can speak. Let's do roll call real quick. Okay, perfect. I'm just gonna go across my screen here. Jacques Julien. Okay, you're on mute, but I can hear you. Juliette Boone.
Here.
Mason Moyer.
Here.
Terry Palmos.
Yes.
And Danny Theodoru. Yeah, we see you.
Hi.
You.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yay. And then Judy Nog.
Here. Thanks.
Perfect. Is that it? I think that's everyone. Everyone's here. We have a quorum. Of course we do. Okay, great. And let's review tonight's agenda. I have an item to add, but I want to see if anyone else has any amendments they'd like to make to tonight's agenda. No. Okay. I would like
the same one to add, right? Charlotte, you and I have the same one to add.
I think it's this. I think so. I was just going to motion to add an item before 5A to briefly discuss amendments to the ordinance discussed last night on mobile homes and manufactured housing. I think here I wrote 8432. So just a brief discussion. Is that going to cover what you?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Great. So motion to add an item before 5A to discuss the amendments to ordinance 8432 regarding mobile homes and manufactured housing.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Aye.
Aye. Yep.
And then,
yes.
okay, perfect. Thanks, Judy. Passes unanimously. And Judy, if you want to, because your video's off, if you feel like if you want to maybe, you can always just speak or raise your hand. Just want to make sure that you're going to be able to say what you need to say. So, okay, perfect. Great. With that said, we'll just move to public participation. And Lynn, we'll let you go first, but Jay, if you want to put on the timer, that would be great. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Someone unmute Lynn. Oh, it's here. Hang on. Here, Lynn, I'm going to unmute.
Okay, this week at the, this is Lynn Siegel, 538 Dewey. This week at the CU South meeting, I had an epiphany of the problem to Boulder's housing issue. And that is, it was CU that gave me this idea, because I said there's 66,000 students in the CU system. There are 35,000 students in Boulder with a population of 107,000. And the other 30-some thousand are put between 3.5 million people in Denver and in Colorado Springs. So why aren't they absorbing all of these undergraduate students? There's probably 60% of the campus here is undergrads. And Fran Draper from Community Relations and Public Relations from CU said that this is the research campus. Well, I don't think so. So we need to make it a research campus. And I say, if you want to make a reason to, you're not having to be here, because ultimately you don't want to have a housing board because housing is no problem in Boulder, right? Then make some directive to the city of Boulder to get these students out of town. These undergrads need to go. Frances Draper said it herself, this is a research campus. Not only do we not need CU South, we don't need them threatening us about floodplain and all of this issue. We've got plenty of things that we have to cover with infrastructure in Boulder without the burden of this, 20 some thousand students that are undergrads that are not part of the research campus. They need to go to Denver and to Colorado Springs. So just tell the city of Boulder they may need to activate on that issue, because it's a huge thing. I was just at the East Boulder Working Group today. Housing, how are you going to, everybody, housing, how are you going to house me and my family? We want to own, the Hispanic community, the service people. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen when we've got 20,000 high-end students here taking up the population in this town. And it's 107,000 people. We should not have that burden. You can figure out how many people per population, how many students per population we are supporting. And it's outrageous what we've taken on in this community, and it's unacceptable, and it's got to change. This is not a benefit for Boulder anymore. And Frances Draper said it herself, it's a research campus. So we need to repurpose it to be truly a research campus. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks, Lynn. Appreciate it. Have fun at the open
Yeah,
space
well,
meeting.
unfortunately, all of these, it's integrated. All of these different boards and these departments are all integrated. There's not one thing that doesn't touch the other. So I have to be in two places at once, twice this week. Same thing, another night.
Good luck. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay, great. We'll have David speak next. David, are you still in here?
I'm here.
You are.
Thank you, HAB. If you guys could open up the email I sent you most recently, the one that says easier. So that has a few pictures in there that I think will help us. Well, thank you so much for having me and for your beautiful service. I read your letter and I understand some frustration, which I share, of course, but I want to lift you up. And as Greta Thunberg said on Democracy Now! Yesterday, and I'll give you a link, we're going in the wrong direction, but you are the hope. And I really believe that about you guys. You're a great group. And as Martin Luther King said, land use and housing are really the keys to overcoming the segregation and separation that explains so much of our current politics. And now is really the time. It's a great, unprecedentedly great time to transform. So I just want to sort of propose this housing model, this a revision of the housing model that we proposed with the Back Porch Group back a few years ago. And I want you to understand it, that it aims to change the model from the barbell society of rich and poor to a bell curve model of mostly middle income housing that we produce. Not that we don't produce low income housing, but we're making mixed income housing. And so it aims to change the model, and it aims to do it by creating a few examples that have a lot of neighborhood input at the beginning that people can see, and then we can evaluate the best ideas. So just in the pictures there, you see the history. Goose Creek brought together folks from all sides of the housing debate starting in 2016. We met for 2 years, and they came up, Scott Holton, there, the developer on the left, came up with the idea of doing some pilots. So now let's just look at this graph a little bit. And this is, the promise of this idea. So the green is all housing units that we produce historically starting in 1960 in the city of Boulder. And the blue at the bottom is for sale, deed restricted, where it is and where it could go with our pilot. And in the middle is the crash that has occurred with for sale middle income housing, where there's virtually none of that available any longer. So that's the picture that we're trying to improve, with the blue line arcing up as we try some pilots, and then we say, oh, here's some things that we can do to that would really work for everyone. So the final image there is just one example of a pilot. We bought 750 North Street, and we've been trying to do this 8-unit micro condo project there. We proposed it in the middle, the midterm update, apparently. So anyway, we're just going to build a co-op there, but we'd like to, create some area where we could do these pilots next year. Council said they would consider it in the retreat, and we'd like you, our ask for you is if you like this idea, please remind council members by email or however that it would be great to consider that in the retreat. And maybe you all could take this idea up next year. You've been doing great work. The tiny homes, the homeless issue, very important. And this is part of that. Instead of doing just one kind of housing, let's do mixed income housing. So thank you so much for your beautiful work. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, David. I just have a quick follow-up question. Is that graphic, the last one, or the rendering, is this, sorry if I missed this, is this a land trust proposal, or is this a middle income housing? I'm sorry, I didn't have time to delve into everything. Is this
This is an example of the model we're trying to promote, and there's a secret sauce in there, Charlotte, of a group of people coming together to propose this densification, which was what we did there. And then the city says, oh, you're going to do shared vehicles. It's going to be all permanently affordable for a mixed income group. Okay, we're going to let you do that. And then they donate the land to a community land trust. So the land trust owns the land. The people who buy the units own their units. And, so these units cost $150,000 to $400,000 in that model. Now we're going to do a co-op instead, where the shares are $200,000 and $250,000, but it costs you, $1,300 to $2,000 a month to own this cool building. So that's what we're doing now. Thank you.
Charlotte, can I ask David a question also?
Please. Yeah, it's fine.
Hey, David, it's Jacques.
Hey, Jacques.
A question, or maybe a couple questions for you. I want to understand, so the challenge with this project that you've got in front of us here, and the reason that you're now doing a co-op, is simply because the city process didn't allow for the density that you were looking for on this lot. Is that
right? We had a big win, the Housing Boulder 2014, 2015 identifies this as the key priority. Then midterm or the update, we got this idea of doing infill pilots into the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. And we thought, oh, we're home free now. But, we tried all different ways. They just couldn't figure out how to do it. Bob Yates says, we'll put it in the midterm update and let's discuss it there. So we do that, but still there's just this block, and council actually considers it, but they can't. You're not supposed to do anything important in the midterm update. It turns out. So now at the retreat, Sam Weaver was for it. We met with him. He was for it. Many council people were for it. So it's just one of those ideas that people need to consider and think about. Oh, here's a way we can actually have beautiful housing. Everyone likes it. They saw it. They toured it. This version of it, that version of it. I'd like to have this next to me. I'm not threatened by this. It's not going to decrease property value. Oh, they're doing this shared vehicles. Not going to increase traffic. It's going to reduce traffic. Not going to block anyone's view. Wow, we can do it.
David, let me just ask, if I may, Charlotte, continue with another question. Briefly, David, this is just, so the pilot that you're talking about, currently you have one pilot that you're proposing in the.
Well, that was just an example. So the idea is to let, not just this one idea, maybe you have one, or Charlotte has one, or Terry has one, or whoever, that was what, Jay was trying to help us create, have a something that meets certain criteria, but it could take different forms. And we were just showing, here's how you could do it without a subsidy on one lot, all permanently affordable, no added cars.
And so what you need,
our example.
So for example, what you need is the city to create within their code structure or their regulatory structure, something that would allow for a pilot project in such a way that it would be excluded from certain current zoning rules under this umbrella category of being a pilot, correct?
And it already exists. So it got put in that already exists in the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, page 112. It's right there. And so this is like operationalizing it. So
Right, but
how would we do that?
That's what I want to, David, that's what I want to be clear on, but it does not exist within the city ordinance. It's in the comp plan, that's one thing, but it's not within city ordinances.
That's right. We need to
Okay.
do a special ordinance, and
And
we're trying to get a
what
nod of 5. We've written an ordinance. Staff, someone smart like Jay, etc., could take what we've written up and make it something council consider it. They could vote on it, and we could all get off to the races. We build 5 the first year. We build 10
Okay.
the next year.
All right, thanks, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're gonna mute you now.
Thanks,
Please
David.
feel free
Please
to
do.
stay.
Please do.
Okay.
No.
Thanks, David.
You guys can continue the conversation another time. And I will also follow up with you. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to ask to unmute you. My bad. Okay, Jay, you can unshare your screen, I think, unless there are other speakers. Oh, William, sorry. William, would you like to speak as well? Oh, sorry. I asked to unmute him. Sorry, guys. I'm like not doing so hot. I asked William to unmute, but I can't hear him. Corey, do you know William wants to speak? No? Okay.
There?
I asked
Did we-
William to, I don't know. It doesn't seem like he wants to speak. That's okay.
Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure. You can, okay, great. Woo, that was fun. Great. Well, if there are no other speakers, then we'll continue to the approval of minutes from November 18th. Are there any amendments, edits that folks would like to make to the agenda from last meeting? No. Okay, great. Perfect. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from November 18th? All right, Danny proposed the motion, seconded, all in favor? Great. Passes unanimously. And now we'll move on to matters from the board. But I'm just going to mute myself for 1 second because my parents are speaking and it's really distracting. Sorry. Sorry, it's really distracting. They have on like Burr Lives in the kitchen. It's just like a mess. Okay, here we go. We're going to the amended item, which I'm going to add. And so this can be very brief in response to the topic. A topic actually introduced, in our letter. Rachel Friend suggested that our board look at Ordinance 8432, the amendments to the ordinance in January at our next meeting so that we can provide council with some suggestions for their second reading. And numerous council members, including Kurt Fernhaber, agreed that, we discussed this item in greater depth. And I know that Jay might want to speak to this a little bit. Jay, I know you and Corey were talking about some back and forth with some other staff members. Was there anything you wanted to add about HAB's participation in that?
Yeah, so I can provide a little bit of background. I was also on the council meeting last night. What the project manager can do is she can prepare a presentation and send you guys a memo sort of it'll be in your standard packet in January. And it'd be great to get your feedback as council requested. And then we would basically delay first reading and second reading to adopt the ordinance. The only sort of slight wrinkle is that Mary Young was concerned that this was kind of time sensitive. So if you recall the manufactured housing strategy, HAB reviewed that, provided feedback, input. And then the ordinance was sort of the implementation piece, and that the main bulk of that, 95% of it went to council back in September and was adopted. And then this sort of little piece sort of was an add-on, sort of last minute request from Park. It was from Park residents requesting some additional protections. And so there was a desire to get that done fairly quickly and by the end of the year. So I think what Mary Young had asked for was to find out if the amendments that Crystal Launder, the project manager, had proposed were addressed all their concerns sufficiently, and if there was an urgency to get this done quicker. And that CAC at their first meeting in January would sort of make the final decision. I think our recommendation is still going to be to have it come back to HAB, but I just wanted to warn you, if there was sort of an outcry from sort of those residents saying that we want these protections in place sooner, that may change. So does that help, or is that way too much information?
So if I'm understanding correctly, at the CAC meeting in January, they'll decide whether we look at it in January or whether we look at it at a later date?
It would be if you look at it at all.
At all. Okay.
Yeah. But like I said, our recommendation will be for HAB to take a look at it at your January meeting and postpone first and second meeting.
Okay.
With what Mary Young had raised at the end.
Yeah. Mason and then Jacques.
And I think Jacques, you were first if you want to, okay. From what I heard last night when I was watching it was that Kurt was for us hearing it. And at the very end, what Mary and Rachel agreed to get their needs met was that we would hear about it in our meeting on January 20th. And that the hope is that we could come up with something by then. So I kind of have two parts, is that last night, Kurt had said the reason we hadn't seen it was because we were working on other things. And so I'm curious why this didn't come to us sooner and then we wouldn't have had to delay this at all. And if no matter what, it could be prepared and presented to us on the 20th, so that in the future, we're already brought up to speed on where this is at, so that I'm hearing from a couple of the different mobile home parks that there's been some consistent stuff going on there, and that there may be a request for us to potentially in the future with city council participate around some issues with mobile home parks. So I'd like to be informed on it no matter what, and see it and hear the presentation so that we have the information and we can go forward with a recommendation, whether you guys recommend, staff recommends we postpone or not. So
yeah, I agree that the second point, yes, that we can definitely do a presentation regardless of what the outcome is at the CAC meeting in January. As to your first point, so I mean, the reason that HAB did not hear the ordinance is that I did bring it to the chairs. I think it was in either July or August. I don't know, Jacques or Judy, you're gonna have to help me remember. But the focus at that time was really on the unhoused issues, and the chairs basically declined. I think the sentiment that I heard and that I remember is that HAB really focused in and provided input on the policy, which was strategy, and that the ordinance was more implementation, and that there was a desire to focus on these other things. So I don't know, Jacques, Judy, do you?
I don't remember that.
Recollection?
I have absolutely no recollection of that at all, and would be surprised because I want to say something in a little while about us getting more information. I mean, to me, this is a good example of something that I would like, if possible, for you to talk to all the departments within housing, that anything that comes up about housing, comes to our comes to our table, whether or not, I mean, just comes to our table, and that the consensus be included in the minutes. So it's in writing that anything that's related to housing, we want to hear about. We as a group may decide to not discuss it for whatever reason, but I think we should know about it. And I actually don't recall it. Maybe you do, Jacques, but I don't recall that at all.
You know, I'll pipe in. I think I do. I have some recollection of a discussion about some changes within the ordinance. I think my recollection is also along the lines with, you know, I think, I guess my question is this one. I've been rolling through this over the course of the afternoon since I saw it. And I would still say from my perspective, this seems to be a reasonable shift, this ordinance, this change. So I guess one of the questions I had for you, Jay, is I do agree that I think we were in the unhoused world pretty heavily at that point. And I think that I do recall us sitting and just saying, well, we think that's the implementation piece of things as you described it. And we weren't sure that we needed to be involved in that piece of it. I guess my question would be, are there pieces of this? Because as I read through it, there's maybe one or two small items that I might say, oh, I might have a little feedback on, but in general, it seems to be reasonable and kind of a rational addition. So are there particular aspects of this, Jay, that there are concerns about that we think that HAB may, you know, bring a different perspective? And Mason probably has her pieces too on that, which would be great to hear.
Well, it just seems like we're talking about process and content, you know, which we've been trying to shake out over our 3 years of birth anyway. So the process piece, when Jay or anybody from housing brings something to the housing advisory board, if the chair and vice chair, you know, how do we let us decide as a group? And like Judy said, so that we can hear everything. And somebody may bring up something like, it may seem reasonable to you, Jacques, but I might, having had lived experience in a mobile home park, see something that somebody else might not see. So being included and being able to have that conversation, I think, is important. It should always be presented so that we could be brought up to speed. Then with the content side of it, yes. You know, Rachel brought up a really good point. I heard this on a different side of it, is that she was like, sometimes HAB or any of the boards are always a part of things that are contentious. So we're always grappling with something that's contentious. And she goes, maybe this is just a win. Maybe it's easy and we all get to go, yeah, we're on board with it, and stamp it, and it goes off, and it gets to be the easy win. So even if it doesn't look like we have anything that we want to raise a flag on, we should also get to be a part of the wins.
And I would respond to that, is I actually agree with that process piece. You know, I think this was within the process if we have it set up, but I agree with you that, for instance, had I seen this at that point in time, and I don't even know if this was a completed document at that point in time, Jay. So, but I think that's a good point that Judy and Mason bring up, that we find a way to bring this into HAB's orbit so that we can at least understand and be more aware of everything that's moving around in the housing world. So I
Terry,
agree with
go ahead.
Mason on
Oh,
that.
sorry, not Terry. Danny, you go ahead.
So I agree, both Mason and Jacques, and I guess my question is, how are we trying to figure out how to do this as a process where, you know, we have a heads up. So if we're going to have the whole board address it and discuss it and figure it out, so that would obviously have to be at a meeting. So we make that decision at a meeting. How much time would we have typically, Jay, do you think, till this thing's moving forward? Because, you know, if we're, so like, let's say we had something at the December meeting, and, you know, almost like we're talking about right now, you know, would we have that opportunity to say, yep, we want to have a have this as a agenda item for the next meeting, right? Because if we're figuring these things out on the fly, we might not have the background or the time frame to, have that substantive discussion. So I think maybe we have something where almost like adopting the minutes, we have an update of everything that comes out, and then we can kind of figure out how to agendize that once we have it. But it's really a question of time frame. So
Yeah, Danny, I was gonna propose, yeah, I definitely think that in January we do a deeper dive into this, because I know not everyone has had a chance to look at the ordinance itself. I was only able to get through like half today. So I like that process, but Jacques, did you have your hand up again?
I did, sorry, but then I started eating a Christmas cookie. One of my subs brought me a huge tray of cookies today. I was like, perfect. What I was going to respond to was the process piece a little bit. And is it possible, and everybody just looking for feedback, is it possible to say that if something like this comes up that is a housing related issue, that we can just be provided that information outside of a meeting, at any point in time, Jay, and we can review it. For instance, let's say this came up, we can review it prior to the meeting. And if members feel that there's something of import in there that we want to grapple with, or that should be brought up, like Mason says, there are things that I'm not aware of, and others may be, or perspectives, then we could raise a hand and say, let's put it on the agenda. But it would be kind of a first clearinghouse. And if everybody says, this looks great, let's, let it roll on. We don't think we have any additions, then we can let it pass through.
Danny, go ahead.
Jacques, that's what I was saying. That's my concern is, the agenda provides notice is part of my concern, right? So the agenda is a mechanism to provide notice for the public as well. And, if we're talking about, like, if we're saying like, hey, if there's anything housing related from any of the different city departments, we want to know about it. And I'm open for anything. I'm just trying to figure out how to do it. So how much time frame we have and how we can have a mechanism where we decide what we want to hit and what we don't want to hit, because I think we need to make that decision at a meeting, a public meeting, and then we need to schedule it for it. And sometimes we can pop it into the agenda, but it's just a little challenging. So I'm up for anything, but that's kind of my concern.
Okay. I think I saw Mason and then Terry.
Having sat through a lot of those meetings on the agenda, one, especially now year 3, it's getting less and less and less that the city even brings anything to us. So I personally would be for, it's always a yes. If the city brings something to us and wants us to consider or see or view something, it should always go on the agenda. When we originally had the meetings, especially in the first year, the big concern was when we were trying to figure out our direction was that because there were so many activists and people interested in housing, that we would get so many projects from the individual board members that's what we would manage most is whose issue should be on the agenda, or whose initiative or project that they want to work on should be on the agenda. But we've never had that issue. And like I said, it's gotten less and less and less. I'm not sure that I could imagine another year like our first year where we literally had maybe 9 things every agenda. It was we were covering a lot of information. And even doing the unhoused stuff, we should have been able to get 1 or 2 more items into any one of our agendas. So I don't think personally we should ever deter our housing departments from bringing something to us.
Terry?
Can I jump in when Terry's done too?
Yeah, Judy and then Jacques after Terry.
A couple thoughts. One, the idea of well, first of all, I think that the issue at hand right now is whether we review this ordinance or not dealing with mobile homes. And I think we've kind of gone way off that topic in talking about every potential housing issue coming to us.
Well. Can anyone else?
Can you hear me?
Having trouble? Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. two things. One, the idea of having every potential housing issue anywhere in the city coming before us is, to me, a little broad. That's one. And two, I think what we're trying to talk about now is this ability to hear this housing ordinance, right? Or the mobile home ordinance, I'm sorry. Whether we're going to weigh in on this in January or thereafter. Is that the topic at hand? It seems like we've taken that and gone way left of center talking about process of having more issues, or am I missing something?
Yeah, I think there's two issues. Like we were talking about, the context of being this one particular issue with the mobile home parks, and then overall how we wanted to handle housing issues in the future.
Sure. So maybe right now we talk about the mobile home issue because that's what's on the agenda.
We just don't have all the stuff. We don't have the emails that came into city council.
I understand that. So maybe the answer is, let's get all the information because we don't have it. And then if we're asked to review it, we'll do that.
Absolutely. The intent is for us to have a deeper discussion, a deeper dive in January.
Good idea.
If timing is an issue, Judy, sorry, I'm delaying you. You're going to be after this, but if timing is an issue, if the dates are a problem, how can we move our meeting a week earlier? How can we make ourselves more useful to council? If the date's an issue and that's going to prevent us from discussing it at all, I'd say we just move our meeting. But we'll see what other people think about that. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Great idea. That's a very good idea, because it seems like on several occasions, topics have come before council or whomever, mainly council, and they're discussed and decided for the most part, and then we get to weigh in, or then we get to hear about it, because the timing doesn't line up. So I think your idea of if we have to have a special meeting, I don't know if that's possible, or if we have to move our meeting to be able to weigh in before council makes the final decision, I'm all for that. But I think the issue at hand right now is, are we going to hear about this or not? We're not sure. And I think I don't know if we all, but I would like to hear about it. So if we could settle on that, and that would be good.
Yeah. So Jay, if we can move our meeting a week earlier, and I don't have a calendar in front of me, would that put us in the window that council wants us in, since this is a timely issue and I know there was concern? Let's see.
So while I was looking, one of the things I wanted to point out was at the city council meeting, Adam inadvertently gave the wrong time. He said our meetings are on the third Wednesday of every month. And I'm pretty sure they're on the fourth Wednesday, aren't they? Of every month. So the date of our January meeting.
I think I think they're the third, Judy. Oh no, they're not. You're right, because this meeting was actually moved a week early.
Right. So so that's something just to throw into the mix. The idea of moving meetings is much easier right now, since we're not meeting in city council chambers, because it's just arranging a Zoom. So even if it conflicts with somebody else's meeting, it's not a crisis.
Yeah, Mason.
And also the 20th is the inauguration for anybody who's going to be watching that. So
right. Yeah. So with that said, Jay, the question still stands. If we meet the 13th instead of the 20th, when is the CAC meeting? Or what, or I don't know. When's the meeting?
Is on the 19th. City Council's meeting is on the 19th regarding this with public comment.
Okay.
Well, for now it's scheduled. So they'll decide on January 4th at CAC whether or not to postpone it. And like I said, our recommendation is going to be to postpone it. So I don't think it's an issue. I mean, if you would like to move it up and try to be more timely, we could try to arrange that. But it is a bit of a challenge trying to get everybody's schedule aligned.
Understood. Yeah. Danny.
I think particularly in this instance, moving it up, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then we don't have to worry. I mean, it'd be really unfortunate if we just have that, scheduling snafu. So if we can move it up to the 13th, it works for me.
Okay.
And maybe we just make a vote that you could indicate that, we're all willing to move it up to the 13th or something, but I'd like to just have that ahead of time because then we have that opportunity to, have some lead time there for council, and
Great.
then not making the decision to postpone without knowing what we're doing. So,
Okay, Mason?
Jay, can you share why staff is going to make the recommendation to postpone when Kurt said last night that he recognized the urgency on it?
Well, I think the feeling is that council asked you to weigh in on it and you should.
Okay,
But-
so if we move our meeting to the 13th, would there be a reason to suggest on the 4th to postpone it then?
I guess it depends on, the outcome and the type of feedback we get and how long it takes. But yeah, no, I mean, we can arrange it. I mean, we could look at schedules right now and choose that date.
Yeah, I mean, since that's the agenda item that we're on, I think
Yeah.
we should just deal with it right now.
Yeah.
Upon first glance of everyone's schedule, how is it, would everyone be able to attend the 13th, January 13th meeting? 1, 2,
Yes.
yes, 3,
Yes.
4, 5, and then maybe from Juliet. Okay. I mean,
And Corey?
and Corey.
Yeah, I'll be there that week. I have a council memo actually due that morning.
Okay.
Let me
And then
check
you can
my,
hang out with us. Great.
yeah, actually second reading is going to be going to council that morning. My memo submission for this ordinance.
No, it'll get postponed. Don't worry.
Okay, so that's going to get pushed. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm available. Count me in.
Wow. Okay. Then I will propose a motion to move our January 20th meeting to the 13th.
It was never the 20th, so you might want to delete that part. Our meeting, that was just something that they said at city council meeting. Just to have our meeting in January be on the 13th.
Oh, all right. But our meeting would have been scheduled for the 20th, right?
No.
No, it's the 27th.
7th.
Oh my God. Great. Right. Okay. Perfect. Then from the 27th to the 13th.
So
Okay. All in favor? Perfect. Passes unanimously. Great. And then, sorry. Okay, great. Now that we've dealt with that, I know that there are some outstanding comments that want to be, folks were making about which items are brought to HAB. Are all the items regarding housing brought to HAB?
So I have some thoughts on that. If I could.
Yeah, Judy, I just wanted you to be able to finish your thought.
Yeah, thanks. So my thought on that is it's not any item that comes up any place in the city of Boulder on housing necessarily needs to go to us. It's anything that comes up in the Housing and Human Services Department that's going to be going to council. And so as soon as staff starts working on something about housing that they know is going to go to council, we should hear about it. And I'd like it to not be Jay's responsibility to have to chase after every department all the time to find that out. I would just like it if we could have a consensus that we'd like to know as soon as staff starts working on a project that's going to council in Housing and Human Services, that Kurt knows to tell his staff people to notify us. And then we can decide at a meeting, we can just be appraised of how it's coming along and figure out, if we want to hear something about it or have a presentation or something.
Jay, do you want to comment on that?
Well, so I just want to be clear. I mean, to me, the process question is not necessarily about staff bringing it to HAB, because I did raise this and I said this would be appropriate for HAB to review. So I think it's more a question of what's the role of the agenda committee with the chairs. And maybe decisions about what gets put on the agenda should be made by the entire board as opposed to just the chair and the co-chair.
How about if instead of having it be an agenda item in your report, you know how you've got that section in the agenda that's the staff report, you just tell us each meeting about all the things that are coming up, and that way it goes right to everybody there. You know, I'm really surprised. I mean, I'm worried about me having memory issues because I lived in a mobile home park myself for a year and a half, and I'd be shocked if I let that go because it's very important to me. So I actually don't recall it at all. And if I let it go, I'm really sorry. And, you know, and I don't even think I was vice chair in July anymore. But anyway, yeah. So if you could just give a report, everything that's going on, then the whole HAB could hear everything. Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a problem with that. I'm just still concerned that it's not going to solve the problem that you're
Yeah,
trying.
I mean, what happened has happened. Like, we can't change what happened in the past. You know, I'll tell you that if anything comes to my attention from council, it would be on the agenda. I just haven't had that experience where council asks us to look at anything, and so that's the mindset I've been operating in. But I agree with Judy. If council is going to look at anything related to housing, we should look at it. It shouldn't even be a choice. It should just come to our board because that's what our board does. It doesn't need to be this like carried out thing at all. It's just a matter of like how that information is transferred to us. But as for now, we will be discussing this in January, which is great. And I wanted to segue to Danny. You had your hand up.
Yeah, and I think, you know, somebody brought up if council sends something to us, I think that's obviously, I agree, that's a no-brainer. That's, you know, obviously we're going to listen to it. With the other way, I wouldn't want it to be too much of an imposition just on Jay or something like that. So that's why I was saying if it's like, here's a list of things that are, you know, in the works going to city council. And I think, Judy, this is what you're saying. I would hope it's just housing related, right? And not just housing and human services, not as broad as that. But here's a list of the things that are going. And we could have that just as a quick line item and say, do you want to listen to it? Do you want to delve into any of these any further? And then we make a decision each meeting for maybe the next meeting, something like that. Outside of that, it gets a little squirrely, I think.
Okay, Mason.
Yeah, Jay, it seems we've fallen away from this, but something Jeff used to do is that we had the housing department's work plan. So we had our work plan and the schedule of that, and then we had the housing department's work plan. And what we did was in the agenda meetings, we looked at what was coming up for you guys. And because there were so many things going through at that time, on how to place them in, we did it. Don't you guys remember, Judy and Jacques, how we did it at the end of every HAB meeting? We would look at their plan and our plan, and we would say, how does this look for the next 6 months? Is everybody on board with how this is shaking out?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree, Mason. I feel like we had more transparency into what was happening as a whole, and we used to look at that. And I think that would be good to get back on that track.
Okay. And as I recall, it also came out in the agenda, with the agenda, the work plan, the council work plan came out too.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I can do that. I will do that for the next meeting. I think we fell away from that just because the number of agenda items was getting so thin, sort of like during COVID and post-COVID.
Right.
You know, the mobile home ordinance or manufactured housing ordinance was really one of the few projects prioritized by council during the pandemic. So,
Okay.
I agree. I'll try to do better to make sure that the full board sees the full work plan and you can see what's coming up.
Thanks, Jay. Juliet?
To tack onto that, when you're looking at those future subjects, Jay, it would also, I think, be helpful for us to know what type.
Can't hear you, Juliet.
Uh-oh. Me.
There
I
you
may
go.
have my, hang on, can you hear me now?
It's much
Yeah.
Can you
better.
hear me now? Okay. High tech issues. So my comment is, as you're gathering that information, it would be helpful to know what kinds of feedback or ways in which we could be of use to Housing and Human Services and Council in terms of what kinds of information would be helpful for us to procure for them or weigh in on to make their meetings more productive. So when they say weigh in on this, what do they need us to weigh in on? What specifically? And I know in the past when we've had issues come up, staff will present some information and then they pose questions to the group saying, what does HAB think about this or that? And so knowing those in advance also helps frame the thinking before we come to the meetings.
Thanks, Juliet. I agree. So we've gone, we just like created our own agenda item. So I apologize, but I felt like this needed to be discussed. Terry, I know you're like, oh my God, but this needed to be addressed. So Jay, thank you so much for heeding these comments. And I really appreciate the work that you're going to do on this moving forward. And
Charlotte, I think it's a good idea. I would like to have more topics to discuss and more topics to weigh in on. I think that would be really good. I just want to make sure we don't get hit with 5 things a month and just spend hours talking about, should we talk about this? Should we not talk about this? When really nobody even asked us to talk about it.
If
But
it becomes
see more topics. I really would. I would like to see more issues coming through our table, just in a way that were somewhat useful rather than just us talking amongst ourselves as to whether we should or shouldn't talk about it. And does anybody even, want our input? That's
of course.
But I would like to see more topics for sure.
If it becomes a problem where we have just too much to discuss, we can evaluate it then. But, as Jay said, we've been thinning out in terms of topics. So
I agree. I think it's good.
Yeah. Okay.
I like it.
So are there other comments? Otherwise, I would like to move on. Okay. No? Great. Okay. Thank you all. That was really great. So we're just going to move to the committee and project liaison reports. Judy, thank you for taking the time to attend this meeting in your current physical state. So would you mind just giving some comments on the attachment on the joint committee?
Yeah, so the joint committee is temporarily done meeting, and we plan on meeting one more time towards the end of the month, I think. And so this is the report we wrote, and it's pretty self-explanatory. We talk a little bit of the background of how it came to be, and then we talk about the things we've done. We've done the Tiny Homes Village pilot report, the safe parking lot report. We decided to not do a report about sanction encampments, although we are in support of them. We feel that there's a lot of material out about that, and we didn't want to cross over with what other people were doing. We worked a lot on the data and the dashboard and have concerns about that, as we stated, or ideas that we think might be helpful for changes. And we definitely support an oversight committee. We felt that in the research we did, we thought the county was going to set up their own oversight committee, and that's not exactly what they had in mind. They brought a few people in to discuss a few certain aspects, but there really isn't a county oversight committee. And so we highly encourage that. And then that's all. This is being presented at HRC at their next meeting. And then we plan on turning in these reports, our final reports to council with all the attachments, as well as the initial recommendations, so they can remember what HRC and HAB recommended initially way back in June. And that was that. We feel that there's lots of work that can be done, but that the interests of HAB and HRC are a little bit different just because of what we're supposed to be doing. The Human Relations Committee is more interested in things like terminology of such as being service resistant. They don't like that language and feel it's really important to get that changed, because that implies that people are resisting services for homelessness when it really is they don't qualify by nature of they don't want to give up their car or whatever. And then for us, we're really interested, and we're segueing off into studying tiny homes and all that. We should be more interested in the housing aspects of it. So there may be overlaps where the two groups might want to work together on something, but we think each group can carry on with the particular areas of most interest to each one.
Thanks, Judy.
Mhm.
I just had a question, and I'm sorry if this is redundant and if you already addressed this, but have there actually been feasibility studies done on what you propose, like in like the tiny homes village pilot and the safe parking pilot? Like, have there been feasibility studies done?
There have been, yes, well, where it's already being done, the costs are available and even the breakdowns on the cost. But these right now, like in Longmont, for example, the tiny homes village is of no cost to the city. The money's being, the landowner donated the land, and the nonprofit is raising the money for all the building. So, and the safe parking lot is the same. It's no cost to the city. So both of those are no cost to the city. And there are, yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks, Judy. I also have one more question with regards to the data and the dashboard. Do you know when there's a count of, I don't know if it's yearly or, every 2 years, Mason, I think you know this, the answer to this, how often are unhoused individuals counted? Do you know?
Once a year.
Once a year.
And it does not include anybody who lives in a vehicle.
Right. So that's what I was going to say. Like, who counts as unhoused? Is it, and then there's this invisible population that's not counted, people who are surfing couches, living in cars, like all these, people just getting by, not living on the street, but, making do. And so I know that in California, this is a problem. There's this invisible population that's always left out. And
so they have something called the point in time survey that's done. I believe Mason is done in January. Is that right?
Yep.
The point in time.
And it's done by volunteers who sign up to go do it.
And I know it's at least statewide, but I think it's also national. Is that correct?
Yeah, and don't quote me on this, but I don't know that every county does it. Jay, do you know? I don't think every county does it. They have to have a certain amount of volunteers that go out and do it. And there is, based on some information out of California, like a percentage pad on what we think are people living on sofas and in vehicles. And those were all, I mean, I don't have it readily available, but I got really close to adding up all those numbers for what we think Boulder County's at when I was backing into Boulder County's numbers.
What were they?
I don't have it readily available, but if you're interested, I'll dive back into that and bring it back out to you.
But also anecdotally, it's pretty well understood from people who have lived experience or people who are advocates that the number of the point in time survey is much lower than the actual numbers. We've talked to people who said they could name at least 50 people themselves who wouldn't participate in the point in time survey. So.
Well, thanks for that. Just curious. Oh, sorry, Mason, go ahead.
I might add that we have the county's probably resident expert on the issue, Bill Sweeney here. He may know some of this information that you're asking about as well.
And I wanted to say one other thing. When I wasn't the main person who's working on that information, the data collection, but the county, the city itself couldn't even get some information from the county, and the county wasn't even, we had to get permission that had to go through up this chain of command to even get the information we did, because there's all these state prohibitions from information going to county for privacy and all this and that, and it's a mess.
Data is extremely difficult right now. Even I'm spacing on her name with the equity plan. Her and I were talking about it, and she's trying to include racial data for the equity plan as well. And yeah, even like you guys all saw my dialogue with Kurt, was that he kept pointing us back to the city. But if you go there and you look at it, it's all based on percentages. So you had to go, it was this very convoluted process. And what's hard to wrap your head around is that we do coordinated intake on all the people that are going through our shelters. So to some degree, we have all of this data, but it's not getting either utilized or condensed or made available to the individuals who be making the decisions on it. It's incredibly frustrating and very challenging.
Can we see if Bill Sweeney is here and wants to say anything?
I'm totally comfortable with that. I don't know if he wants to, but Jay.
I think he unmuted himself. Bill?
I don't have any intention of speaking. I don't have anything to offer, but I'm glad to answer questions.
Awesome.
Thanks. Thanks so much. I'm glad you're here. No, I appreciate it. I appreciate the information, Mason and Judy. Are there any other comments on the final report? No. Okay. Seeing none, Judy, thanks again. And then we can move to Terry and Jacques. I don't know if you have anything to say, any updates or new revelations, findings.
Actually, Jay, last meeting, there was some discussion about the similarity or saying the similarity between backyard tiny homes, fixed foundation tiny homes, and ADUs. And we kind of just assumed at the last meeting that those are the same thing. And I wanted to ask you, from the city's perspective, whether it's code or just perception or whatever, are those two things, the ADU rules that have been adopted and backyard tiny homes, the same thing to the city, to you, to the code? Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, I think the distinction you were trying to make was size. So backyard tiny homes being smaller than 400 square feet, right? So your typical ADU is going to be more than 400 square feet, but the recent change to the building code allows them to be smaller.
Perfect. Wonderful. Right answer. And I think I heard last meeting that that there have been 500 ADUs built since the regs were implemented. Is that about right?
No, I don't have the exact number, but it was, I think it's closer to 200, a little bit less than 200.
Okay.
So we basically doubled the number.
Got it. And then tell me this, from when the ADU discussion started to when something was adopted and we could actually go out and do it, about how long did that take?
The whole update legislative process?
Yeah.
It was about 12 to 14 months.
From the beginning of ADU concept to implementing the rules?
Oh yeah.
I thought it was a lot longer than that.
Yeah, when it was originally piloted, what year did it start?
That's what I'm talking about.
You mean, when did we first get ADUs in Boulder?
Exactly. When did we do the first pilot? And then we went back to do before, so we piloted it in what year? And then how long did it take us before we took that pilot and started updating?
Got it. I'd have to go back. I believe it was, they were allowed again in 1980. Before that, they were prohibited. So yes, in 40 years, we got 200 units.
So here's what I'm getting at. Here's where I'm going with this. It takes a really long time to get things, concepts, new ideas, new types of housing like ADUs through the process, through everything that needs to happen in order for it to be adopted into code, and then people can go out and actually act on it and utilize the code and build things. It takes a long time, years and years and years, typically, between all the subcommittee meetings and all of it, and it's just a long time. My point, and I think I made this last time, but I want to build on it or reiterate it, is we have something here that has been established. It's in the books, right? It's there and it's possible. I would like to think that we could use our influence as a board to help build on that, to help make it easier for more ADUs to be built. I think there's some restrictions there with density and a lot of waiting lists and whatever else, and not so many in a certain place and all that kind of stuff. I haven't brushed up on all the details of what it is, but I know there are barriers to ADUs right now in certain places. But we do have the foundation, no pun intended, for ADUs in place. I would like to take our abilities and help see if we could move that forward, make it easier for ADUs to be built. And we won't call them back to tiny homes, we'll call them ADUs, it'd be easier to call them that. I think that's an opportunity that we have as a board to say, look, we have 200 of them now. I thought it was 500, I swear, it doesn't matter. We have 200 of them now. We can have another 100 next year, another 100 next year, 100 next year. And by doing that, we add hundreds and hundreds and potentially thousands of units to our existing housing stock without having to build any more roads or all the other reasons why ADUs make a lot of sense. That is my 2 cents on tiny homes / ADUs and where I think our focus should be with respect to tiny homes. Build upon what we already have, build upon the rules and regs that are in place. It's always easier to add and tweak when something already exists than try to create it from scratch. That doesn't preclude us, because I know everybody's really excited about tiny homes on wheels. That doesn't preclude us from trying to get tiny homes on wheels moving. Boy, I'm rolling with the puns, aren't I? But I think the focus should be on building on what we have, because I think ADUs are good and I think they work. And I think people who have lived in them like it. I think people who have built them like them. And I think it's a good thing that we can add to and build on and keep these numbers building, because it's a certain type of housing that we don't have a lot of, obviously, but it's very unique and it can serve a lot of people and add a lot of rooftops and bedrooms and bathrooms and kitchens for people in our community that we don't have, and we can do it without having to revolutionize the code. Now I'm done.
Charlotte, so I'll kind of piggyback on top of that. And I have not gotten as far as I'd hoped. And Terry, I kind of agree. I mean, I agree with the general track that we started talking about at the end of the last meeting, which is there are 2 things that we're looking at. And I've had this interest in the mobile home, or the mobile ADU, so to speak, or the tiny home on wheels. And the other one is, as you said, we already have the code in place. And so the second piece is the one that you're kind of putting forth here. And I've, just so everybody knows, I found some interesting programs around the country that specifically work to fund or to support funding and construction. I see a couple of problems with getting more tiny homes built, even with the code that we have in place. And one of the ones that I've run up against, and this is anecdotal, but with my clients, is that it ends up just being more money and effort that they can engage with. And what I found is there's some interesting programs which are essentially, and whether this is privately funded or somehow supported by the city is something that I think we should look at and discuss, and then we'll bring to the board. But these programs essentially work as a share where people who want to put a tiny home in their backyard can basically, it's a work share essentially. And so people who want to put tiny homes in their yards, you create neighborhood groups and organizations and say there's 5 people, and they support each other in the construction of their units with whatever skills and resources they have. It was a really interesting model that was in use in a couple of places. So in my research, I found that that was one piece that was interesting because it helped to overcome that hurdle that people have of expense. The other one that's an interesting model, and Terry, this might be a good one that you might have good insight into, and I'll send you some of the information on it so you can look at it, is private organizations that are essentially funding ADUs.
Yep.
And they help to create the ADU. And I mean, I don't know where I fall on this exactly yet, but they essentially create the funding for the ADU, provide the funding. They actually will deliver an ADU. And this will require some work with the city on pre-approved plan sets for ADUs. You can build an ADU that looks like this. We have X number of plans. They provide it, they put it on site, and what they are doing is they're collecting essentially a piece of the income that comes with that off the top. And they're funding this whole process through what they collect from potentially hundreds or thousands of ADUs that are being created.
Right.
And they're basically financing them.
That's right.
On the front end. So those are a couple of possible ways to do this or to help move the thing that Terry's talking about.
And I'll
may be viable.
Totally agree, Jacques, and I'll add on to that. Yes, there are organizations out there that fund the production or the building of ADUs, and then they basically collect a portion of the rent along with the property owner. That exists. And it seems to be working. But I'll say 2 things on the cost, or one thing on the cost and one thing on financing. The cost of ADUs, there's so many different options now. There's so many pre-made ones, and you buy them on Amazon. I've dug into it, and there's all different shapes and sizes and forms and fashions, and they put a crane on it. I mean, there's a lot of options as far as what ADUs can be built in a backyard, above and beyond your typical foundation, stick construction, et cetera, et cetera. I'll take you a couple ideas more. What if we had affordable housing dollars go towards helping pay for ADUs, and then the ADUs are rent restricted, right? You can only charge so much rent. So part of the ADU, pick big round numbers, costs $100,000 to build an ADU in somebody's backyard, a 400, 500 square foot ADU. So half of that money comes from the Affordable Housing Fund. The other half comes from the property owner. But for that money, you have to limit how much you can rent your ADU for a period of time. I don't know what it is. If there's one thing that I know, money flows to real estate in Boulder. if there's ways to build things and they're profitable, there's money out there that will come to help make it happen. So there's a billion different ways around money. There's several different ways to finance it, and we can dig in all the details of this if we wanted to. There's so many different angles to this, but I think before I keep going forever, because I get into tiny homes and ADUs and all of it, I think that there's a lot of options as far as getting them built for less money than people think, getting them approved. The approval part's the hard part. And then financing them, I think there's a slew of options out there that we could pursue, whether it's private people like you're talking about that build a lot of them and then rent them out and split the money with the property owner, whether it's the property owner who can finance that through a second loan on their property, and they rent it out, it works. I know, Mason, that doesn't help the person living in the tiny home, but it's as far as building equity goes, but it does help them live in Boulder and at least be on the island, So with that said, that's a bunch of things I'd love to dig into. if everybody would want to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say, it seems like there's a lot of energy around ADUs and how Boulder can get more ADUs. And I know from working with clients, right now, I have a client that's been in permitting for like 7 months. It's just like, it's just crazy. And do you know how long, I know San Jose, California has pre-approved ADU plans. Do you know of any other cities that do, and like how long did that process take from, initial like conception of this idea to actually like finding a partner, or like finding a form that works? Jacques?
Yeah.
Or
I think that I don't have the names of other towns off the top of my head, but as I was researching that, I definitely ran into a number of different jurisdictions where the pre-approved plan was being used. Jay, did they do that in Portland?
No, Portland doesn't have pre-approved plans.
No. Okay.
Denver does.
Okay.
For a pilot in West Denver.
Oh, really?
I know. I mean, I could go into it, but
yeah. Okay.
I mean, I do think that this is landing on the other piece of this whole puzzle of getting more ADUs built, and I think that it's probably close to a 50-50, and it plays into the cost aspect of it, which is the zoning and building approval. For
Yes.
these. And
so it really seems to be an issue. Like, I don't no, we don't have a representative from planning board here, but this really seems like a project that needs to be worked on collaboratively between planning and HAB.
It's zoning really, so it's council, but yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Danny?
I just want to say, I really appreciate this conversation because I think it's very substantive. Terry, I absolutely agree that, the best mechanism is to take an existing regulatory structure and try to work through that structure to accommodate something new. And I think that's absolutely a focus that we can try to have here. And something we talked about, not just in contemplating or allowing them, but also streamlining them by pre-approved plans, whatever it may be. But that's something that we've talked about. It's in our letter. It was in our letter last year. This is exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about. And so you really hit home on that. And, in terms of the financing too, I mean, really, if you look at it, this is just so analogous to, PIFs and TIFs, urban renewal, and that whole notion of amortizing the cost over time. So there's an incentive for the homeowner, there's an incentive for the community, there's an incentive for the occupant. So I really think this is an important part of it. And frankly, I don't not looking at the ADU regulations right now at this moment, I don't know that it necessarily even excludes the notion of tiny homes that are on wheels as something that might even be part of that regulatory structure. But I think this really taps into something that I'd like to see us explore further, because I think there's a ton of promise on this. And it's a great way, the bottom line is housing stock is really the paramount here to do whatever we can to get housing stock so that we can have opportunities, especially if it's deed restricted, even if that's temporary. It's a huge step in the right direction. So I'm very supportive of it.
Jay, this has been on my list since our last meeting. I haven't gotten to it, but I just emailed Will Birchfield. So just to kind of follow up on that, I will talk to Will just to get sense from him on the issues with pre-approved plan sets from the building department's perspective and what that would look like. And then I guess the other piece is what can we do to look at maybe creating structures that are, or do you guys think that it's worthwhile looking at creating structures that are purely citizen driven for kind of this concept of the work share around creating, and putting those neighborhood organizations together. And I'll gather more information and send it out to you on that. But it was just an interesting one because it was more grassroots in its energy. It was neighborhoods basically, getting together and creating these structures. And then people just saying, I want one, I want one, I want one. Okay, how can we get together to help build them? And I don't know if you guys think that that's a worthwhile thing for HAB to engage with and try to encourage or not, but it's just another piece that we could look into. Terry, you're muted.
So
Sorry.
that idea, the neighborhood getting together to build these is feeling a little Habitat for Humanity to me, a little like that. And I kind of like that. That's pretty cool. That's a great idea. I mean, I don't know if neighbors are going to get together to do it, but if they did, great.
Okay, Juliet.
Yeah, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess if we could, I would be supportive of looking into that if we could show, or any of these options, I think what will get more traction is if we can build a case and say, hey, if we have pre-approved plans for ADUs for the city, we can reduce the building time from X number of months to Y number of months, and we can reduce the average cost per square foot from Z to A and have it be faster and less expensive, and build a case for how we could increase the housing stock over a period of time. And that would be something that would, in my mind, have legs for council to take, look at seriously in order to get something moving forward from a recommendation standpoint. So I think anything we look at, we need to be able to substantiate with what is the net effect and how is that net effect beneficial compared to the current existing effect of what we have in place. And I don't know how we do that exactly. I'm just proposing that that's how we frame it.
Juliet, I totally agree with you. And that's some of I think I've started to put together a little bit of information from these organizations that have been doing both of these things. The one that's more commonly, I think, occurring is what Terry also has seen, which are these kind of funding mechanisms that are put in place. But there's, as I said, there's also some groups out there that are doing this kind of work share piece, and I'll dig into them and see kind of what kind of success they've had, or try to start, putting numbers together on that. Because obviously the original presentations that I saw on it suggested that it was being quite successful. But what that really means, I don't know numbers wise yet. But yeah, of course, we'd have to dig into that a little bit.
That'd be great, Jacques. I'd be interested to see where they are and just look at those programs and
and
look at compare like those environments to Boulder and how feasible that might be.
Yeah, and I just apologize. I had hoped to have
okay
much of that ready for this round, but I don't yet. So
it happens. It's okay.
I'll keep working on it.
Terry?
There's something I touched on earlier, and this may be going a little far for this purpose of this discussion, but when you build market rate apartments or housing in Boulder, you have an affordable housing requirement, as we all know. One of the options for that is to do them off-site, to build your units somewhere else. And that happens a lot, especially when these big national developers come into town and want to build 200 units and they don't want anything to do with the 40 or 50 affordable housing units that they're obligated to build. So instead of paying the cash in lieu, they give that money to another group, and that group goes out and builds the 50 units. And actually, a lot of the times they leverage that money to build more than 50 units. But there's another huge revenue stream there for offsites to maybe figure out a way to work with private property owners in Boulder, utilize some of that money to build ADUs, because it also provides a different type of housing, right? It's not just another apartment complex with 40 units in one building or whatever the case may be. So the cash in lieu offsite avenue, I think, could be utilized with private property owners to build or help finance ADUs, again, with the understanding that they are rent restricted for maybe forever, maybe it's forever, but there's a lot of revenue sources out there that I think can be tapped into to help people pay for ADUs in Boulder.
Go ahead, Jacques. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Jay, what are your thoughts or feelings about that kind of initial kind of volley from Terry about bringing in funds from, housing for ADUs, if we can get an ADU on the ground for a lower cost, for instance, than another door, another permanently affordable door? Does that make sense to you, or?
Yeah, that's the problem. It's not really possible because there's a state prohibition on rent control. So we wouldn't be able to require the rents to be restricted. What we've done is, and all this is in the ADU memo, and it might be better if offline, maybe Jacques and Terry and I chatted about, what we did back in 2018. The memo identified, basically I think we were up to 12 biggest barriers for ADUs in Boulder. And we didn't implement all of them because it was supposed to be this sort of incremental change. So that might be a good place to understand sort of what the barriers are still. But also the other piece I did want to mention, so we have promised to council that we would do an evaluation. Okay, what happened after the adoption of the 2018 regulations? What were the changes that we saw? What got produced? And what are still the issues? And so I think that's going to really help us to better understand. And I've already heard, process is extremely long, and it's a deterrent. A lot of people aren't getting through the process because it's still fairly cumbersome, even though we simplified it significantly. And it's really expensive. So, I mean, COVID is going to really sort of throw a wrench in that analysis a bit, because a lot of that delay is due to COVID. But anyway, I would just suggest maybe if we chat it offline, it might be a little more productive.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Ken?
I'd love to be part of that conversation too. I mean, I've actually even litigated rent control statute and stuff in the past, and so I've dealt with that a lot, and so I'd love to be part of that conversation.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Jay, yes, rent control is illegal, but there's agreements that are entered into, right? I mean, we have permanently affordable housing all over town, so the rent is controlled. It's just not rent control.
Yeah.
Well, we have affordable ADUs too. So the way
exactly.
affordable ADUs
Exactly.
is through an agreement.
Exactly. So maybe we could have more of them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be a difficult sell to use city funds for something that's not deed restricted, permanently affordable.
Maybe it could be. Maybe
No, but I think that's what
that's the challenge. Anyway,
I think
This is great. I'm excited to hear about this conversation, and I really like where this is going. I do want to look at the time and see if we can move on shortly, but any last few comments, Jacques, or? Okay, yeah. Awesome. Well, hopefully you all will be able to sync up outside the meeting. Jay, if you're able, that would be so great. So very cool. Let's move on to discuss the listening session for next year. Crazy, we've made it. I have given some thought to the timing of this, and I'm wondering if either if February or March would be a good time for folks. If we're looking at the ordinance in January, our time will be taken up. And just to give ourselves time with planning, I appreciate us doing this in the listening session in February or March, just to give us time. I started to dive into the process of that, a few months ago, and was totally overwhelmed. And so I'm happy to, take the lead on outreach, writing the letter to the editor, working with the city to, make sure that the listening session is broadcasted on social media, et cetera, gets in the papers, but I need someone else to commit to help me. Danny, are you sure? I don't want you to overextend yourself.
No, I promise. I'm down. Down. We'll get together. We'll do that. I had we talked about it last time, so I'm with you. So I think probably March would seem to me to be a good date for it, because springtime might be a little warmer. Who knows? Maybe there's some means of having something that's outdoors. I don't know, but I think probably March. Let's get through the winter and so to be late March would be a really good opportunity to to put that together.
Great. I'm really excited about it, and really looking forward to the feedback that we're getting. And I definitely want folks from EFA. I can't remember their names, but I would really like them to be present. Jay, I'm sorry. Who are the folks who were at the meeting last?
Julie Van Domelen, but who she wanted to come was her group of people who are living with the issue, who are recipients of services.
Exactly.
They've been getting leadership training. She sent me an email fairly recently that she wanted to remind us that she would love to have them come.
Well, that's great. If you want to get back to her and just let her know that we are going to do this, I can be in touch with you about that, but that's super great. And Danny, I would love to talk to you about planning, et cetera, how we can just divvy up things and, take on what we can and feel good about. So, so I will put forward a motion to have our housing insecurity listening session in March at our March meeting. I'm not sure what that date is.
Second.
I'm
seconding.
Oh, the second. I was like, the second. Okay, all in favor of moving or of having listening session in March at our March meeting?
Aye.
Okay, thanks, Judy.
Does that conflict with, not that anyone's going anywhere, but the spring break week for BBSD?
I mean, maybe,
Yeah,
but I don't know.
I don't know if it's relevant, but anyway.
My son's in middle school. He's been on spring break for almost a year now. So
yeah, it's I don't know. Maybe, but I mean, having a meeting during spring break, I don't know. I'm okay with it.
Well, if it's a listening session and we want people to participate, we just want to make sure they're focused.
They're not going on vacation. Want to make sure they're not traveling.
Or just having a staycation at home with their family and trying to.
If you can't come, Julia, it's okay. I mean, just let us know. But I think we'll be okay for March. Either way, it looks like we have a majority. I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hands at least. So
I think we can look up, can't we, the Boulder Valley School District calendar anyway and find that out right away?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I'm not sure there will be school.
Yeah. Anyways, the motion passes. We're gonna have this in March. We can look it up. I don't know when spring break is, but it's hard to think about vacation.
It's that week.
that week.
It's that week. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that week.
Okay, well, maybe we move our meeting to accommodate you for folks. We can always
I'm
do
just
that.
thinking about people participating. I want to make sure we maximize the participation in the listening session.
So that's one of those months where there's actually a 5th Wednesday. So March 31st is the week after spring break. It's pushing it back to the spring. So that could be an alternative date. Just throwing it out there.
I guess I'd also like to add that since this is about housing insecurity, the people we're expecting to come to this meeting, I believe, are the people who are really worried about housing issues. And is it silly to think that they would be less inclined to be going on vacations if they're worried about being able to remain in their houses? I don't know.
Probably not, but they may have more pressures at home if their kids are unoccupied for a week
Mhm.
without classroom instruction. So I just wanted to throw it out there. I don't have an opinion one way or another, but I wanted to make sure we just were mindful of that.
Well, we certainly have run into that in the past.
Well, with our meetings in the evening, wouldn't they, with the classroom, Juliet, what were you saying, that with classroom instruction, I mean, they would be getting out of school in theory at 3 o'clock anyway.
Not being in school so much, Mason, is just having a parent having a child at home and having to occupy them the entire day, and maybe, maybe being at their wit's end and not having any mental energy to attend something in the evening because they've been trying to corral their family all day. So
Yeah,
I'm just worried about mental energy and the ability to participate.
Yeah,
No, I don't anticipate kids not being in school.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I'm just curious how one day differs from the other. They would have to occupy kids all day and still consider what to do in the evening anyway.
I don't think we need to debate it. I just wanted to bring it up.
I'm not trying to debate. I thought we were just talking about the issue, but if you feel like it was a debate, I mean, we could, but like it's mutual.
I'll throw in my 2 cents worth, which is, I think that anytime we can be aligned with kind of standard scheduling, it's probably a better option for public participation.
So are you saying that a day when parents are teaching at home all day and then being in a meeting all night is better than on a day when it's during vacation?
I personally think that, I mean, maybe I'm totally wrong on this, just speaking from my life, I think yes. Because there's schedule and there's structure that I'm more aware of. Like when I look at that, to me, it's like, oh, I don't know what the heck's going on for me, particularly on that day. So even if it's a school day, I feel like I've got some structure. And I understand what's coming at me.
Thank you for debating that with me.
You're welcome, Mason. I knew you wanted it.
Should we move them? Okay, so with that said, then should we move our meeting to the 31st in March? Okay. Okay, motion to move our March meeting from the 24th to the 31st.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great, passes. So we will have our listening session on March 31st. Beautiful. And Danny, I'll be in touch with you about that. And if anyone has particular groups of people that they think should come, think it over, and we have some time to do outreach. But everyone can participate and help with the process of planning this. So just wanted to make sure everyone knows that they're invited to help.
2 cents.
Yep.
And that I would love, I know we're 50% rental in Boulder and I get all that. And I know a huge percentage of those kids are students. I would love to hear from, I'll hear from students too, but to try and get as many non-student renters telling us about their experiences. I think for me, that would be very valuable. People who have been renting in Boulder for a long, long time, less transient people versus students who come in for a few years and then leave. That's just my 2 cents. I don't know how we do that, but I would like to hear personally from from more non-student renters than student renters, if that makes sense.
Mason?
Terry, do you have a relationship or access to the rental association board where we could potentially reach out to them and ask them to send out something?
I don't know which rental. And I know what you're talking about, but I can't think of the name.
Is it Barra?
Bahra. I think it's Bahra, or I know what you're talking about, Mason.
I know.
Arha.
Bahra.
It'd be cool to see if we could build a relationship with them to be able to disseminate, flyers or to their email lists or something.
Or even some of the bigger management companies that manage a lot of units around town, even though they may not want to tell their. But anyway, yeah, I know what you're saying. I don't have a relationship with them, but I think it's probably easy to find them and talk to somebody.
I do. I can help with that.
Awesome.
Oh.
Thank you.
There you
Thanks,
go.
Jay. That's great. Okay, perfect. Anything else before I move on? Okay, great. Then we'll move to the final annual letter to council. This was sent on Sunday, but are there any questions, comments, or?
It was sent, correct?
Yeah, and the board was copied, so I hope y'all received it.
I didn't, but I just want to
Oh.
thank you for all your hard work on developing this and doing it. I know every year, somebody steps to the plate and typically they get lambasted. And it's a challenging position and job to be in. And I appreciate you, again, spearheading it and doing such an excellent job.
Thanks. Go ahead, Juliet.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, I second that, what Mason just said. Charlotte, thank you so much for stepping in when no one else would step into this role and taking that on. I know it's a lot of work and it's a lot of opinions to juggle and consider. And I just want to make a comment about the letter after rereading it, and shame on me for not speaking up more on this on the last meeting, but I felt that the part about what didn't go well for the housing board, in my opinion, just came across as a little confrontational and grievance laden, and maybe we could be a little more collaborative in our tone with council, because we do, at the end of the day, serve council. We want it to be a two-way street and a collaborative and not confrontational relationship. That's just my opinion, and I want to try to make sure I voiced that concern earlier in the process, because obviously it's too late now, but I didn't have a chance to share that the last time, and in rereading everything, that was my feeling. But thank you, Charlotte, and I do appreciate it. Does not diminish appreciation for all the hard work and thought that went into it. So thanks.
I also wanted to say, Charlotte, that I think that a lot of people on council already actually read it, besides just Rachel, who mentioned it at the council meeting. And I thought I sort of had a good feeling that they heard it. They made a big effort to want us to participate in the discussion about manufactured housing. And I can't help but think the part of that is because they took the letter seriously.
Yep, I would agree.
Harry?
Charlotte, I agree with everybody else. That great job. And when I read it, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago or whenever the first time it came out, I kind of got that pumped up feeling, like let's go get them kind of deal. But then I implemented kind of the 24, well, maybe it's 14-day rule. I don't know, but whatever it's been. And there are little pieces in the what did not work well that I thought, again, I agree, Juliet, a little aggressive. The one in particular for me is in paragraph 2, where it talks about, we kind of cryptically say happenings at city council meetings illustrate how politically active groups received more attention than HAB on topics related to housing. It feels like we're trying to say something there in code that it's kind of underhanded a little bit. And I don't know, maybe it can be softened up just a little bit. I'm not looking for anybody to rewrite any, wholesale changes. Just, I don't know. I felt maybe a little softening could help. If they've already read it, then I don't know if that's going to help at all. But yeah, I agree with Juliet that maybe a little softer approach is usually a little better, especially when we're trying to get council's respect. I don't know. I'm torn on it. I think a little softer approach might not hurt anything. And the cryptic part, at least cryptic to me anyway, about, politically motivated things and not really giving any detail or any examples, just kind of theoretically what we think may be happening about policy disagreements. I don't know. To me, I didn't really even understand that. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, so sorry, Mason, I'll just jump in quick. I think everyone on council will understand what that means. I didn't want to say, hey, you actually included a slide in your presentation from Safer Boulder, but not from your housing advisory board who discussed this issue, right? So I didn't want to just like bring it out, but I heed your comments, so I heed it. Mason, go ahead.
Well, I understand where both Juliet and Terry are coming from, but I think we need to be really careful here. It's already done and it already went out. And there's, if anybody, especially for those of you who haven't written this letter or really stepped to the plate and written any motions or written any the recommendations that we're sending to council, is that like maybe the next recommendation, one of you guys can step to the plate, because it's a very challenging thing. And then especially to hear the criticism after the fact when you just worked on it for 2 months and sent it out to us repeatedly. So I just want to be sensitive and aware of the fact that that's kind of hard after the fact to say that that it's a challenging piece. And maybe we could have participated in that process a little earlier on.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. But I'm not talking about the whole letter. I'm just talking about like 3 sentences.
It's gone.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, next time, who knows who will, take the lead on writing the letter, but definitely just like look at the drafts, because I did have Corey send it out like a lot. Don't mean to.
You did. And I think I said shame on me for not paying closer attention or calling that out sooner. And I think I was focused on other parts of the letter that were grabbing my attention, and there's and not on the whole thing. So I hear what you're saying, Mason, and it's true. Everyone's gotta participate and speak up. I missed it, and my bad on the timing.
Jacques? Oh, you're muted.
I'm happy with how the letter sits now. I have the same discomforts a little bit. I think that Juliet and Terry have expressed, but I want to say that, and almost, a little bit here, in an advisory role, I think that in a way it is a good conversation to have with council, in that it brings up a certain kind of engagement with the relationships between boards and council. And I think council's been hearing a lot about it. And I think that's what, Mason's saying, is that I think council and, and members of council have responded to that positively. So at the end of the day, I kind of said, I think it's, we could argue about how it's worded or not, but I think it's a valuable piece that's a concern I know of mine from being on the board. So I don't see that there's a problem with us expressing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to add, our last 3 or 2 years when we wrote letters were very soft and gentle and played well. And we got lambasted after both of them publicly by city council. So I think it's interesting that for once we've kind of stood up for ourselves and made it clear about what wasn't working and being real about it. And they're responding. Whereas the last 2 years, like I said, we got lambasted.
We'll see.
Well, it was already sent, and I'm ready to take the heat from council and go ahead and present this unless someone else wants to do it. So.
Well, like I said, if you do, I can.
And I'm with you.
Although
yeah,
I'm
happy to do it. I have no fear. So, okay, great.
And we did have that conversation regarding the tone, and I think we all had that ambivalence regarding it. But we had that conversation in the November meeting. And a lot of other things came in there. But I mean, I think Charlotte, you speak for all of us, and we can talk about the nuance. But we appreciate the effort, and the message is out there. So we'll see where it goes. Right?
Exactly. Great. Any other comments before we move on? Okay, great. We'll move on. Then, thanks everyone. To new business. I don't have anything for this one. Jay, do you recall me having anything to say on this? New business. I don't.
No, it's just a standard agenda item.
Oh.
So
great.
If new business arises, this is the time to talk about it.
Okay. Yeah.
I want to put something out there, and I don't know if this is something that would be on council's agenda in the next year, but I know that one of the challenges Boulder has is a large population of in-commuters for work, 60,000 plus people coming in. And I believe in 2015, there was a study, a housing preference study that was done to study the reasons for why people chose to leave Boulder and commute back in. And Jay, you have way more institutional knowledge about this stuff than I do. But if I recall from that study, one of the reasons why people choose to leave is because they want a single family home, or they want more space, and they want it at a lower price. And so I wonder if something that HAB could look at in the future, if it dovetails with council's agenda, is a way to make changes or suggest changes to whether it's zoning or code, such that we could integrate more single family style homes. And I'm not talking about building more single family homes, but rather taking existing housing stock that may be a single family home and converting it into a duplex or a triplex in appropriate locations, so that we avoid the issues that people get sensitive on, which is big blocky buildings and sight lines and building height restrictions. We make it look compatible with neighborhoods, but we're actually creating more housing that people want, because the people that move out, a certain population of the city that in commute, want a different style of home. They want a home that feels like a house, that maybe has a backyard and maybe has a garage, instead of an apartment in a large apartment building. So yeah, I just want to throw that out there as a float out an agenda item that maybe we could look at or weigh in on, if that's something that comes up on council's docket.
I just want to tag on to something that Juliet brought up that might be worth just sort of keeping our antenna out for, is changes that may be happening because of COVID. I think a lot of people that have worked at home that used to commute, and a lot of businesses are now thinking about the possibility of downsizing their sizes of business, because they could maybe have somebody come in 1 or 2 days a week instead of 5 days a week. And it's possible that there might be some adjustment that Boulder could do to have more housing space available from converted formerly business space. And it's just something for us. I don't think we need to have it as an agenda item, but we can sort of be aware of how that might play out in the future.
I saw Mason and Jacques.
Yeah, I was just going to almost say what Judy was saying, which is I think housing is going to be turned on its ear in the next year, and any institutional knowledge that we may have, or Jay had, I think between evictions, corporate displacement, I think we're going to see a very different market in Boulder. As well as the knowledge. I remember, and maybe Jacques and Judy, you could refresh my memory on this as well. didn't we have a presentation on all middle income housing that specifically talked about the timelines, the land use, how it all broke down, and what our blocks are about bringing it back, especially around duplexes, triplexes, all of that? You guys remember that presentation in that first year when we were getting inundated with presentations?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the many.
Right.
Yeah, I do recall that. And I think one of the, to go kind of back to Juliet's point, and then also just segue into this changing housing reality, I think one thing that I'd always, I also say, yeah, there's going to be significant changes, but I think to a large degree for the population that's needing housing and talking about the affordable piece of it, I'm not sure, and I'm just putting it out there, but I'm not sure that I see a significant change. In other words, the patterns for the guys who work on crews and build my houses, and the patterns for people who are cleaning houses or providing services or selling groceries, those patterns might change slightly, but a lot of those are service related pieces where the community most needs for affordable housing. I don't know that we'll see so much of a shift. So I think it's something to be cognizant of, that whatever changes may be coming down the pike, we don't become overly anticipatory around those, is one thought. And then the other one, Juliet, I think the thing about the single family homes and the desire, I'm glad to hear you kind of present that position, that the desire in that in-commuter study was really not necessarily around the single family house per se, but it was around the accessibility to some yard, some green space. It was a little bit more nuanced, although I think it did get kind of politically separated out into a more black and white issue. And, you know, I do think we're talking about that, right, with increasing density potentially along transportation corridors. I don't know where anything stands anymore with the large lots, large homes discussion that at one point was on the table. And, you know, what happens with, 1 acre lots or more that have a single home on them, and is there a way, so I think, yeah, there's a lot of discussion around that, and I agree with you, we need to keep our eye on that stuff and see what's coming down the pipeline, and if any of that stuff gets back on the table for council.
I also wanted to point out, it's not that we always need to have a big discussion about it ourselves. Sometimes it's just good to have a presentation. Like, I think the first couple of years we got to have fabulous presentations that really helped us. And I think sometimes it's okay to just have somebody talk about that once things settle a little bit, just to improve our overall knowledge.
Yeah, and I would suggest, sort of in the vein of what you've been talking about, the middle income housing strategy. It was adopted back in 2017, and that's where we talked about sort of that missing middle type of housing. We're really good with the single family high end. We're really good with the higher density 4-story. It's all the stuff in between that we don't get. And it's just really challenging to try to produce, ownership opportunities that have that space for a yard for a dog and kids to play. Because even townhomes are going for, $1.2, $1.5 million in Boulder. So it's not affordable for sure. But anyway, so my point is, it might be, and what Judy was saying, we could go back and revisit the strategy and say, okay, this is what we talked about back in 2017. Have these trends changed? Have they abated slightly? Or, should we be looking at new opportunities and changes? So that's a potential work item.
Jacques?
Just, real quick, this kind of does wrap back around to David Adamson's pilot program and looking at ways to make more efficient use of land, which is essentially what his pilot program is trying to do, I think, from my understanding of it. So, that's just one of the things that I think we've been talking about for quite a long time. And I know I've been talking to people like David about it, but you know, that's something that they are trying to get council to put on their plan. So I guess I'm putting a plug in for that again, that as individuals, if we feel like that's something valuable, we could put a little leverage to say to council, hey, how about we take a look at pilots? We may not know exactly what's going to work, but we got to start somewhere. And you know, we can't wait for every other city in the country to give us the data we need to decide what's going to work.
Mason? Mason? You're muted. Sorry, you're muted.
I made a meme about that before this meeting too. This brings up a really interesting point as an aside to what Juliet's bringing up. And I noticed it with our tiny home discussion as well, is especially when we have new members on and some of this historical stuff that we've gone through. And like Judy just mentioned about maybe revisiting, is like, right now, planning board is going through their land use codes and people are looking at their master plans, but housing doesn't have, like our housing board doesn't have a master plan on this. And it'd be interesting, like Jay just said, about looking at the middle income strategy again, because we've changed so much since 2017. Maybe something in 2021 that we might want to do is go back and look at the things that we looked at in that first year and see what do we want to revisit and potentially start tweaking some of that stuff. And especially again, so much has changed. Maybe that's a new business item where we start to look at, and it'll also bring new board members up to speed.
Terry, did you, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to make a quick comment. We could talk for hours about how the pandemic has impacted housing, but I think the unfortunate reality is in Boulder, it's made the middle income world even less and even more difficult. People have been moving to Colorado, the Front Range and Boulder from New York, New Jersey, Chicago, and California for decades and decades. And this pandemic has accelerated that so much. It's unbelievable. The remote work ability for people from big cities and their lack of desire to be in big cities right now, for obvious reasons, has driven so many people to Boulder to rent and buy really expensive homes. I mean, record-setting numbers in the last 6 months. People are paying for rent for single-family homes and buying single-family homes at astronomical prices. Even when we thought they were astronomical 5, 10, 20 years ago, it's even more now. And that's just driven the middle portion even farther out of the picture, which is not good. It's not good, but that's the reality of our world. And to piggyback on what Juliet said, people now who are working from home because of the pandemic, and maybe they won't go back to their offices full time. I think most people will, but there will definitely be less. They actually want more space, right? They want home offices. They want extra space. And so it's driving the demand for bigger houses versus smaller houses before the pandemic. It's amazing how this has changed things in 6 months, 8 months. It's unbelievable to me. But that's a whole different discussion for a different day.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Half of the work I do now is not ADUs, but it's like studios and home offices. People will spend a lot of money on a home office. Jacques, did you have another comment?
You know, I was just kind of nodding my head in agreement, and you know, I always kind of bristle a little bit. That's maybe not quite the right term. You know, the idealist in me bristles a little bit about the realist sometimes, and that's how the world is. You know, and I just want to put out there that we also are sitting on a board where we can start to make suggestions to how we can create the world to be somewhat different. And, you know, again, it's going back to the thing of like, you know, it does become a little bit more of an activist position maybe as a board, but we can put things out on the plate at least. There are things that we can do to impact that. everything from pilot projects to allowing lots to be divided and all these things. So I think we have ways to access change. And we should take it upon ourselves to start to look at it in that way and say, how are we going to access the change here that has to happen? Because as Terry said, all the pressure points right now are pushing in the wrong direction. And we should.
Jacques, I totally agree with you. You're exactly right. But what's happened is the whole spectrum has moved up, right? So before, it was $1 million home that you tore down and built 2 $700,000 townhomes, right? Okay, so at least $700,000 is still crazy, but it's less than $1 million, right? And there's 2 families living on that property versus 1. Now that $1 million home is a $2.5 million tear down, and it's being replaced with $1.5 million town. I mean, it's just
it's crazy. Trust me, I've
it's just yes, it's still cheaper than but it's just I don't know. Again, it's a different discussion for a different day. But
it is,
man, it's unbelievable what 6 months can do in a pandemic in Boulder, Colorado, and housing.
Yep.
Juliet, want to make sure that we kind of circle back to your comments, and if you had any anything you wanted to bring forward for next meeting, or just in terms of things that you wanted to tackle or that you wanted the board to address as a whole. Oops, can't hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to float that out as an idea, and ask, and Jay mentioned the middle income housing strategy, but to the points of Terry and Jacques, the pandemic has changed, and I can't tell you how many new people I encounter that just moved here from major coastal markets with enormous equity in homes in those markets, that they're able to come here, and for them buying things that exist here is really not nearly as expensive as maybe where they came from. I don't know how any community stops something like that from happening. It's just kind of the market dynamics of, I guess, a capitalistic society, and a one that has a lot of ownership, land incentives or home ownership incentives. So just, it is what it is. But I just wanted to throw it out there as an idea for the future and see what people thought about it, about looking at that ways to bring people into the city that have chosen to move out because they want more of that little bit of yard, a little bit of a place to put a vehicle or store bicycles or whatever it may be. And to Terry's point about people wanting more than ever to have more space because they're all working from home, doing school from home. How do we do that? So that's it. I'll stop rambling.
I wanted to add just one thing, if I could, Charlotte, and that's maybe the next time you guys have an agenda meeting, you could talk about maybe just putting a revisiting of middle income housing presentation, and then we just have a little discussion. But I also want to thank Juliet for using this new business time on the agenda to spark what to me has been one of the best discussions we've ever had, because we often, by nature of what we have to do, focus on a specific issue, and this was more of a big picture look, and I think that's very helpful for us. That's awesome. Thanks, Juliet, for starting it.
Awesome. Are there any other comments regarding this? Definitely, we can we'll revisit this at the next meeting. There'll be a placeholder for this continuation. Okay. Great. We can move to matters from staff. Jay, would you like to take the mic?
Sure, I got a couple things for you. So last night, City Council approved a land use change for an acre in Gun Barrel that Boulder Housing Partners has under contract to purchase. So that's exciting. So that's a future, we're going to land bank it for probably a number of years, but potentially 25 to 35 units in a great location, and not displacing any existing industrial businesses, which is a big part of the conversation. And the city, the other big thing that I've been working on is purchasing a leasehold. So the city owns 20 acres in the planning reserve. And basically we bought out the current leaseholder and are in the process of doing that. So where Atlas Flooring is, you guys familiar with that? So all that land is actually behind it is owned by the city. And once the planning reserve actually does get developed in the distant future, that would be dedicated to affordable housing. So 2 opportunities there for land banking. And then the last piece is so the implementation of the newer ballot measure. So there will be, and I sent an email to everybody, but Charlotte asked me to give just a quick update for everyone. And we're still really trying to figure out exactly how to weave that into our existing programs. So, you know, basically you heard a lot about how the housing helpline directs people to services, and we have mediation services available. We also provide rental assistance through EFA. And there's even legal services that are currently offered, but you have to qualify based on income. So the newer basically says it's going to tax rentals $75 each per year in the beginning. And that money is supposed to go towards providing legal representation to everybody, not just low income, and also to help supplement the funds for rental assistance. So the big challenge that the city's sort of trying to figure out is how do we collect this fund or the money? It's a fairly low tax, and it's going to cost a lot to collect it. And we don't, what would seem like a very simple thing to do, we may have to create a whole new system to do it, to collect that $75 a year. So it's going to take a little bit of extra time to figure that out. But we are also pursuing sort of how do we provide that legal representation right away. So in January, when the ballot measure is supposed to be in effect, which was adopted through ordinance, long story. But anyway, we are, our city attorney's office is getting responses from different legal organizations to provide that service, sort of an on-call, so that there would be someone there to provide that legal service at eviction court and to provide those services up front. We are also developing or in the process of hiring someone to provide coordination, because part of the ballot measure called for hiring a city staff person to implement this. And also there will be a committee. So the ballot measure calls out that there's supposed to be a committee that would help advise staff on how to run the program, but also on how to direct the rental assistance from the funds that are collected. So that part probably won't happen until later in the year. I think the idea is we want to try to get it up and running, figure out how it meshes with our current programs and services, get the person hired, staff person hired, and then start the sort of recruitment process to create this new committee. So maybe that was too much information, but hopefully that was helpful.
Mason.
Jay, given how, with the land banking, given how long our process is for housing, should we start that in the next meeting if we want something in 10, 15 years? Just curious. Because I'm pretty sure we're going to have at least 3 years of prairie dog discussion, and maybe it makes sense to start early.
Rhetorical, right?
Totally.
We're all waiting for you to reply.
Jay,
and rhetorical all at the same time.
I just wanted to ask Jay a question. Can you update us on the eviction moratorium? Like what's the state? And is the city going to intercede and extend it? If that, you know, I mean, where is all that?
That is a great question. You know, I'm actually in Oregon right now, and Oregon has had an eviction moratorium at the statewide level since I think April, and they still haven't renewed theirs. Theirs will expire as well. Polis has taken the approach, I think we talked about this last time, he only does executive orders that are effective 30 days, and then he just renews them every month. So I would expect there would be a renewal fairly soon, if there's going to be a renewal. But just also as a reminder, so the city has absolutely no authority to stop evictions. But we do, like we've talked about before, the city does invest a lot of time and resources to make sure that people get the resources that they need early in the process to try to avoid even getting to the eviction process. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for those updates, Jay. Are there any other questions? I'm interested to hear more about the implementation of the, what are you calling it? Keeping families housed?
Well, I don't know if we have.
What are you calling it?
Gun on that one.
Okay.
But I think the basic idea is that it's not just no eviction without representation, that it's also the rental assistance piece. So how do we describe the program with the current scope? That's all. So I'm sorry. So did I mention the study session in January?
No.
Oh, yeah. See, I was supposed to lead with that. So council is going to get an update at their study session, the second study session in January. Sorry, I forget the date, but I'll send you an email reminder letting you know when that is closer to the date. But it's a 30-minute update, sort of where we are in the process, and there might be a few questions for them. It might be what to name it.
Mason?
Jay, can you make sure that we all receive a link to the City Council retreat in January? I know that that's going to be a Zoom process, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I think I can put a note in my calendar.
Awesome. I just want to make sure that for those of us who do want to pay attention, it's available.
Great. Come listen to me answer questions. Great. Anything else? Well, we've reached the end of the meeting unless there's any other things that y'all want to say.
On the calendar check, the debriefing calendar check, can we put down that at the January meeting, we go over the calendar for the whole year? That's all, thanks.
Yeah, make sure we add that to the agenda for sure. Great. Well, I look forward to seeing you all in January. What's the date of our next meeting? Sorry. Oh, we moved it.
13th.
13th. Beautiful. Well, I look forward to seeing you all then, and motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a happy
holiday.
Happy holidays.
Carol, great job. Great job running the meeting.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Jay.
all.
Thank you, Corey. Appreciated
Happy
always.
holidays.
You're welcome.
Very welcome.
Happy
Take
holidays
care,
to
guys.
everybody. Happy New Year. Enjoy
You too.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.